data. This could be expanded into even additional crooks, crannies, nannies. All shifts in velocity, all change in authority on the bridge, all apparent alteration of potential fuel use will result either in, according to how good you are, the production of new data or the revealing of new data. Enough of you have experience, without the term for it, without the description, to know this, but a real Columbus can't take a wrong turn. If you are really out exploring with no particular premise, which, shocking as it may be, is sort of what this amounts to, it is not possible to do wrong. The only thing that is possible, the closest it would come to an ordinary mind, if it was trying to observe this from outside and could see anything, would be that it reveals absolutely unexpected, perhaps shocking, new hints at new data. Because if it was an ordinary person, I'm not going far enough to say that it would actually reveal the data, but it would give them a kind of fright. But anytime you shift direction, new information will be revealed. There is a, as oftentimes the case, a kind of low-level, crude knowledge of this in the general wiring system of life, which is why people like the idea of vacations, why people like the idea of reading a new book, why they like the idea of pursuing a new fad even if it's something that seems to be of no great depth, just to have the latest hairdo, to wear the latest piece of jewelry, piece of faddish clothing or accessory, even though they could not be said to be even attempting any sort of extraordinary expedition, that they're not involved in any sort of unusual activity, just ordinary people. It still offers a kind of very low wattage revealing of new data of no extraordinary purpose, but it is the feeling all of you have had enough of that you could apparently be rather acrid in some observation about fads. But think back, the times that you did something, back when you were younger and more foolish. Not that the two are synonymous, but of course they are. And your peer group suddenly begins to shave off half their head, their hair. And at first, perhaps, maybe you're old enough to be away from home, and you thought, well, I'm a big person now, my mama can't stop me, I could do that, but God knows I'm not about to. And yet over the weekend, everybody in your fraternity house, or everybody around the neighborhood or the places you hung out, it's like everybody that you hung out with suddenly kind of smiled and showed up to cocktail hour around the pool with half their hair shaved off. And regardless of what you said 24 hours before when you first saw it, you go and do it. It does not change your life. It does not give you any sort of religious or mystical or extraordinary intellectual experience, but you do get something out of it. And it is a kind of, now not just the fun. It's the same basis. We're talking about the same energy, but I won't admit verbally what most people would say, that they would just say, well, it was just fun, it was something new, or I got all excited and everybody else had their hair half cut off and I joined in, I was as dumb as the rest of them. It was just a fun thing. The energy behind it, though, actually on a meaningless level is revealing new data, because you got new energy from doing that, which seems to be at the very least, foolish. Just a whim, a nothing. What in the world could changing your hairdo have to do with that which is under your hair? All energy is some form of information and vice versa. The thrill, the little rush, even just a few minutes or an hour or so, just spasmodically over that weekend until you sober up Monday. It is the revealing of new data. Even that small, as I will admit, meaningless shift has nothing to do with changing the course of the universe. Every time direction is changed, new data is revealed. Now in life, this is part of the growth process, and when it gets down to the individual level of ordinary people, though, it is absolutely insignificant. People do not, as you should know, people do not get anything that appears to be of any kind of value whatsoever from shaving off part of their hair, or whatever the latest fad was. Nothing, you could say. But they did get something. They would not have done it. They knew they would get something. And what they got, without it having the verbal clothing put on it to turn that kind of energy apparently into temporary matter, and to say, all right, I got some new data out of that. They just simply got a little fun. I became part of the crowd. It just shocked me that I would be so dumb. It was just the thrill of everybody else doing it. No matter how you describe it, what happened was some new data. And I could pursue this, I don't think I will, and maybe get some of you who are looking a little blank to see that all kinds of so-called emotional experiences in life, anytime that anything has happened to you, even if it appears to be non-intellectual, that is, it appears to be headed, feeding, motor systems, limbic systems, it is still energy of some kind, and if it is energy, it is some form of information. And so doing something that would apparently, from a very reasonable view, that would apparently have no intellectual consequences, even that is revealing new data. It's just that the data that's revealed to those kinds of people under those circumstances, the data seems to have no significance. They do not even notice it as being information. If in some way somebody point out, hey, you know the fun you had just now of shaving off half your head and looking in the mirror, and you laugh, and everybody here that helped you shave it off, and they all laugh, and you go, yeah. Did you realize that's a form of information? Even if they went, well, I guess you're right. Even if they said that, even if you had said that before knowing this, you would still, your operational attitude would be, well, so what? In other words, it would apparently be of no significance. You could have said, well, I would have called it just sort of a cheap laugh, a little cheap thrill from doing this. But if you want to call it information, all right, I'll accept it as information, but so what? Just calling information doesn't make it any more significant to me than it does to say that it was just a cheap thrill. As always, it is being able to take in the beginning, that is, every beginning, every day, every hour, every second, of taking that which is ordinarily available and that which is already flowing through life, and finding some new use for that, and then being able to do it as ordinary people would want to say, and which I must at times refer to as then being able to willfully, knowingly attempt to use it, which is always the case, not just in following fads, but to be a real explorer, to try and be whatever this is about, like a real revolutionist, is you continually are trying to shift yourself. You're trying to redefine what's going on, you're trying to re-examine what's going on, you're trying to change the velocity of what you're doing, even if it apparently is of no consequence, because it's of no consequence, because there's no consequence. That doesn't matter. But it's to change the velocity of what you're doing right then, to change the tempo. The numerous little excursions and tasks and tricks I've given of trying to change the speed at which you operate, the speed at which you talk for 5 minutes a day at a certain hour, all those little things. If you are affecting the direction of the vehicle, of the organism, of the system, of the ship, if you're affecting the direction, literally, new data is being revealed. If it was a Columbus, he is there, and they're saying, he gives out the coordinates, and they're sailing, and suddenly he says, Take a hard left. I'm sorry. Port hard. Well, even Columbus got to play the game. Now, follow this right quick. I'm not going to try to make it any more metaphorical than life is anyway. That he was looking out here, and he's looking, and they're going along, but he suddenly says, just for no particular reason, he hollers to the helmsman, hard left. And they change directions. New data is instantly revealed because he's out here looking like this, and as soon as they go like this, it may appear to be of no significance, but there is new data because he was looking here. And now he's over here, so it's new data. All you've got to do is shift the direction. It does not require, as some of you surely, or I know some of you are finding out yourself, it does not always require by any means that you begin to eat your peas with your left hand on the edge of your fork instead of your right hand. It does not require that you run backwards in the morning. It does not require that you wear your shoes on your head and your hat on your feet. You can change directions internally. Which the rest of it, I know everyone that I put through that followed some of these from the beginning, you found some fun, and some of you I know have gone back and done on your own to just go out and do something that you would not ordinarily do. But you cannot get captured by that any more than you could get captured in believing that by following some ritualistic form of behavior of any kind that is going to reveal new data. It is a new experience, but it is not unlike shaving off half your head. After 24 hours, especially by being around everybody else, but after you being half-haired for 24 hours, it doesn't matter. You glance in the mirror and it's just meaningless. Doing something different, running backwards, using your left hand to eat for an hour a day or for the weekend. It's really pushing it when I used to tell you to do things like do it for a weekend. 10 to 15 minutes. After that, just looking at yourself with a new hairdo, after 24 hours, it becomes rather meaningless. But I know it can be fun, no doubt about it. Just doing anything new fun, taking up a new hobby, taking up skydiving, taking up snorkeling, buying a motorcycle, doing things new that involve what appears to be the external organism of itself. Motor activities. It can be fun and is just splendid. In here, though, you can do it and, as it were, be as sedentary as an overweight Orson Welles. You don't really have to go anywhere. You can shift directions here. You can do it. I guess you could expend enough energy to turn on TV or turn on radio, talk radio, and you can listen. Then you can listen to your dialogue listening and just constantly shift directions. And when you get real good, you don't have to do anything. You can just sit there in your underwear and listen to the dialogue. You don't even have to listen to the dialogue listening to the radio or TV or listen to the dialogue reading a book. There's nothing wrong with that either. But if you're really tired or you don't have anything to read or your TV's broke, or your radio is in hock, or if you're on a desert island and you know how to do it, you can sit there and just listen to the dialogue and shift directions on it. That is when you can do no wrong. That is when there is no wrong turn, and that is when information, data that somebody can use attempting to do this, continually reveals itself. Not just picking up something here and there, or picking up something from listening to me talk or from reading something. You pick it up and you pick it up from life. It's the kind of stuff that other people, when it's happened to them spasmodically, they always attribute to the gods or some mystical experience. Because it was information that is not normally available. It was information that they did not expect. Any more than most people ever expect Cardinal Fang to show up. But it was information that they did not expect. And when it gets past a certain threshold of significance, that it's not just information of Columbus saying, take a hard, throw it to the port, and over there, instead of seeing the horizon over there, the almost motionless horizon over here, he's seeing it over there. There's still some new information available that's been revealed. But when it gets past that kind of level of apparent or relative insignificance, in here, it all becomes a significance if you're indeed trying to go somewhere with no particular premise. Because whatever the dialogue is thinking, if you shift it, you got new information. And you got new information that you can use. And if you don't believe that, then I'll give you the alternative. You got information that's fun. And if you don't know the difference and the similarity between fun and useful, you've been listening to somebody else's dialogue. You've been tuned in somewhere else. That was a joke. Well, it frightened me so many of you trying to think, well, in other words, it would be like I could make a cheap shot at dying an intellectual death and somebody else's life passed before your eyes. In this sense of making those kind of changes in direction, and let's go back to in here, not necessarily just out there physically changing your direction by changing your job, changing your hairdo, acting left-handed if you're right-handed. But changing direction in here, when I say you can do no wrong, not everybody out in the world, because they're not going to do it, and it serves no purpose of an ordinary utilitarian fashion. But if you're attempting to do this, the shift of direction internally is such that you can't do it wrong. It's not just a cheap phrase for me to say that somebody doing this can do no wrong. That's not in any way similar to saying, well, if we're all followers of the great Yogi Bear or some cult or some philosophy and say, well, as long as you look like the great yogi and as long as you carry his card around, as long as you pledge your allegiance to him, you can do no wrong. You know, it doesn't take a cult to do that. They just attack that. That's the same thing as all the world's major religions. They just think it's on a higher level that as long as you trust in God and do what he tells you, you can't do it wrong. It's the same level as trusting Yogi Bear or Pete Rose. But it's internally. Internally, if you've got no premise, you cannot do wrong. There is no way to think wrong. In the sense, now of course I'm talking about, that is that you are trying to plot, you're trying to move, you're trying to take in new data up here. You're not sailing the Atlantic like Columbus, you're sailing your own neural oceans. You're listening to dialogue, it's like waves going on, it's like the pounding of the surf, it's like the call of the albatrosses, mongooses. It's like this noise going on and on. But you can't do wrong by thinking in some way that the noise is not talking. You cannot begin to put together what would amount to neural connections in such a way that you're going to have waves coming in conflict and going to wreck your boat. There is no way that you're going to be scuttled out there in the middle of this kind of neural ocean just because, uh-oh, I shouldn't have thought that. It's not possible. Each and every one of them, every time you can do it, if you can just shift direction just a degree, to go back to that kind of illusion, just a little bit, every time you do it, there is new information revealed, whether it seems to be of an earth or ocean shaking significance at that time is another question. But you are doing something. You are doing something other than standing out there on deck, hypnotized, which is quite, you can sail through life that way, as you know. But you are not going anywhere. There is no new information. You keep churning your own account. The dialogue keeps saying the same things over and over. You keep making the same measurements of life. You keep making the same measurements of yourself. You keep acting as the same kind of measuring device for life itself that the human nervous system is. Another aspect when I said you can't do wrong, and I was pointing out, was not some sort of cheap, inside, pseudo-cultish remark like, well, people that would do this or people that would listen to my tapes can do no wrong. Now, don't ever believe that. All you got to do is go out and drive down the street 60 miles an hour and you'll find out. All you got to do is not file our income tax next year. It's easy to do wrong. To say that you can do no wrong, though, here, is on the basis that it is impossible to do some sort of intellectual wrong when you do not even have the delusion of opposition. And it takes the delusion of opposition to believe that it is difficult, if not impossible, to shift direction. To find out that you personally not necessarily can go out and drive with some sort of impunity at 80 miles an hour up and down Broadway or Peachtree Street or the Santa Monica Freeway or Collins Avenue. But in here, you can just be flying along and that dialogue will be going and you can make U-turns anywhere you want to. And they can't be wrong. But you find out to be able to do that, you personally, when you start doing that, have no opposition. Which, if anybody finds this, if you want a little sidestep, I have personally, and I've even had Kyroot point out that, for instance, from certain views and for certain ad hoc purposes in the past, I point out that even though it could be not improperly said that life is arranged and weighted in such a way as to discourage people attempting to do this kind of stuff. But from another view, if you're getting any more complex and rich with this, from another view, life doesn't really offer much opposition to this. It's more on the basis of, who cares? Now, if you need another aside that I pointed out before, but notice when people even believe, when people think, when life drives them to think, when life allows people to think that they may be indeed either on the verge or in the midst of some extraordinary spiritual, emotional, intellectual attempt at something, the system, the group of people, and of course it always comes down to the conductor of the little phony baloney orchestra, has got to immediately conjure up opposition behind every door, foes under every bed, dastardly villainous forces around every corner, because that helps hold all systems together. General Motors feels that way about Ford. It just doesn't seem to be as bad as, Cult A over here believing that Cult B is trying to steal all their members, or to believe for the Moose Club to believe that after building this and putting on nice good bingo games and contributing 0.5% of all their bar grosses for the year to some charity, they believe that the Elks are now trying to build a club down here and steal all their members by putting in 2 tennis courts. It would seem, even with this, and I repeat, I have used this in certain ways to show you, and I may do it again sometime, but you'll be able to see it yourself. In a certain way, life is arranged. Just the way things are arranged, not personally directed toward you or anybody hearing this. But life is almost arranged and weighted in such a manner, in the past I'd say, to make this almost impossible. I guess I'm trying to be a little more cheerful here in the summertime, and I'm saying life discourages this. It just does. It doesn't happen very often. It's not going on a widespread basis. And even you people being around here for a while, you realize how unpredictable it seems, pretty unstable. Doesn't even have a name, or by the time I come up with some description and use it for 6 or 8 months, and I just seem to forget all about it and start talking about something else. Of course, some of you get sharp and think, well, you're talking about the same thing, you just quit calling it so-and-so. So it's like things are just sort of arranged in such a way to discourage this. But from another view, that's not really a correct limning of the situation. It's not that life discourages this, it's like life just doesn't even care. So rather than think, well, boy, to get down and really do this, you got to fight against all kinds of stuff. I could say that. I can jump back. See, I can take anybody's side since I'm the one that made up the sides. I could say, yeah, you do. You got to fight. I got to admit. You got to fight. But it's not just enemies. It's personified by people. We got to fight, if you're going to do this, lethargy. You got to fight the weight of habit. You got to fight and struggle against the necessity of the obesity of stability in the universe. So in that sense, you're fighting every little molecule in the universe because it's arranged a certain way, and this has no particular place in the grand scheme of things. And we're going to have the final big scenes and all the Valkyries running around, the women in horns and guys big and fat singing, and Wagner in his grave going, yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's like here and there you can have one little person staying somewhere backstage or over in the wings going, Jesus, this stuff, it's too loud, it's too slow, it's not going anywhere. And life does not care. Wagner doesn't care. Opera doesn't care. So you can see from a certain view that life doesn't really oppose this. And the real side stuff that I was going to try to lead you up to and sort of trick you is this. No premise, no opposition. Well, back to the main subject. The attempt to shift your direction, to change your velocity. I didn't go into when I started this out, the other possible expansions, but some of you could find some new, exposed data behind the other possibilities that I said. Instead of just looking at it as a shift in direction or a change in velocity, you can look at it as trying to alter the fuel on which the vehicle is operating, or actually try and interfere with the present chain of command there on the vessel, or attempt to perhaps even absolutely change the authority on the bridge. Maybe overthrow Columbus, stick in somebody else. But all such attempts can also be seen, to tie you into the last time we were taping, could also be seen as the attempt to make your life more complex. Not in any sort of unprofitable, negative way, but in the sense that I was sketching last time we were taping on the basis that that which is more complex is more alive. Every time you knowingly and willfully, which is of course the only way it can be done, attempt to shift your direction, you are making your life more complex. It may be almost insignificantly pogita. It may seem at that time to have no real bearing on what's going on, but you have distinctly, and in a way that's, if it had no real validity, I wouldn't stop here, but every little bitty one is making your life a little more complex. And if it is a little more complex, you're becoming a little more alive. To be a little more alive within that whole context that I was mentioning last time of that which is more complex is more alive, to be more complex is to have, even within this limited area of the universe, is to have more alternatives, is what being more complex is. The little passing examples that I just hit on when I mentioned this during the last taping about that which is more alive, that which is more complex is more alive, and I said all the way from an amoeba, comparison between an amoeba and a man, and all the way at another level, you might think, the comparison between a sophisticated contemporary complex society and a more primitive small tribe somewhere. By any definition in the visible world, you would have to say the island of Manhattan is more alive than the island of New Guinea. It is more complex. It is more alive. It is more alive on one operational usage definition, or by such, on the basis that there are more alternatives. If you're living out, not just, of course, New Guinea, I just pulled out examples. If you were a part of a more primitive tribe, small group somewhere living out in the jungle, your alternatives, you do understand, are limited. You don't even dream of freedom. You don't dream of greater opportunities or alternatives. The more primitive, the more simplistic the life is, the less alternatives there are. It's just an operational definition of being more primitive, if you can see it. Now, of course, New Guinea and Manhattan, sad to say, exists within your own genetic makeup. If you do not have more alternatives, if you are not more complex where you primarily live, and everybody lives sometimes in Manhattan and sometimes you live in Birmingham. Sometimes you may live in New Guinea. You move around a lot. When you are down in the more primitive bowels of your own nervous system, when you're down in the less chartered and traveled and exciting areas of the South Pacific, if not the southern part of the United States, down in your own nervous system, you are less alive, you are less complex, these are all synonymous, because you have less alternatives. If you would like for me to jog your memory again, to take a good visible, continuing example out in the visible world, what seems to be the archetypes of conservative and progressive men and women throughout history right now. If you find somebody living out in a rural area, not just of Alabama, but of Michigan and everywhere else, from Belgium and upper state New York, you find a more so-called conservative person. Not only their religion is conservative and retrogressive, not only is their politics repressive and they're in favor of the status quo, their life itself, their very lives, have less alternatives. And don't stumble around in some kind of psychological quagmire and think, well, it's because they don't have enough education, or because they had to get married young and they start off living in this mobile home and they've never gotten out of it and they don't have enough gas to travel. None of you would do that, right? None of you people. You know by now that the body of life is the body of life. That things are moving right along in a swimmingly efficient manner, and none of this happens in some sequential cause and effect way. But it is a fact, all over the world, all over time, forward and backward history, those that are normally considered to be the more bucolic, conservative, rustic, rural people have less alternatives. And it's not because they don't have enough money to travel around the world, which may be the truth. It's because they are fulfilling a necessary function within the body of life. They are less alive, in the view that I'm trying to get you to take tonight. Not that they are in some way inferior to anybody. They are as much a part of life as someone who would appear to be in an antipodal position in the ordinary scheme of things. They're as much alive, but in the sense of being more complex, in the sense that they have more alternatives, not just to travel, not just that they don't travel because they're poor, not that just because they don't travel because even if they had the money. See, we're getting closer now. On the basis you say, would you like to go somewhere? No, I don't want to go nowhere. I went somewhere once and I didn't like it. I went somewhere once and the people weren't like me. And what did you think? What do you think I thought? Oh, yeah, I see. That is part of the weight. That is a part of I was already referring to as part of the reality behind such notions as lethargy, the weight of stability in life. But they are less complex not because of, I'm going to put it this way to make an English, fairly rational sentence, they are less complex because they have less alternatives. But it's true the other way around. And it's true to throw in the other, that they are less complex because they're less alive, and they're less alive because they have less alternatives, and they have less alternatives because they're less alive, and they're less alive because they, and so on. When you attempt to shift directions, you have opened up a new alternative. It may appear to be small at the time, but if you holler, all right, swing it hard to starboard this time, and Columbus looks over, he may or may not see anything strikingly different from where he was, but there is now a new alternative. He has at least a small 1 or 2 degrees new place in which to look, to scan the horizon internally. It may appear that there is no great immediate consequence or payoff to be had, that your dialogue is babbling on about things that babbles on all the time. You don't even notice. It's just like the constant stillness or the constant movement of the horizons of the ocean, and there you stand just looking, hypnotized day after day. It's the kind of noise you hear, but if you would stop and holler, wait a minute. You tell a dialogue, you tell yourself, it's according to which way you can see it, is you take a hard left right quick, port, and you go over and you take a look at this same thing that you have been thinking over and over and over and over. This dialogue has been going about this thing. It may appear to be of no consequence. It may be about sports. It may be something about religion. It may be something about society, about sex, maybe anything, but you're so used to it, it is like just day after day, month after month, year after year, staring at the horizon, staying out there on deck, and it's now just, that's part of your milieu in here. You just don't even notice it. It's wallpaper of the mind. It's just you. But if you just slightly shift direction, it has made you more complex. You have a new alternative right there. New information is possible. It's whether you can then lock onto it, whether you can see, and sometimes it's no more than going, ha ha, that you realize I have been thinking the same crap over and over and over and over, and it was so much a part of my background I didn't even notice. It is useful. And if you don't like useful, it's fun, which I'll agree with you. I like that better, but that's just my personal taste, which doesn't enter into it. Well, thanks a lot. We got to turn the tape over. How does it seem that presently in life it requires help to stop something that it required no help to start? For instance, you people getting this on tape at some other time in some other place, I remind you for the night, this is not any form of social criticism, because it's not. But I'll start off talking to use a visible example. Now it is fairly popular to see, or it's fairly common to see, even on television and radio advertisements along such lines, but it is now by educated, sophisticated, that is cutting-edge, old-world people, if that is not a double-barreled oxymoron, that now it is considered right up to date, feasible, and by all general appearances necessary, for instance, to have paid professional help to get off drugs. But did it take anybody's help to get on drugs? I'm just picking drugs. We can put alcohol, depression, but we need something that seems like you can get your hands on. But all of you in every city by now, you should have, even if you don't admit it, you've got to turn on TV sometimes, and now they have these beautiful birds singing, or sometimes it's like a 30-second soap opera meant to wrench your gut, I guess. Teenagers especially, or a woman there at home alone. It's the drug problem, and a voice shows this nice little hospital, privately owned for profit, out in the woods, and the birds singing, and it says something like, you don't have to be on drugs. You're not in this alone. Drug addicts not only hurting themselves, it's the family that's hurting. It's those who love you are hurting. Come to the pretty little hospital in the woods where we want to help you. There's more to health than health. I was about to confuse that with that banking slogan that there's more to health than money, and they'd have to go, well, at any rate, ignoring your forgivable lapse into your own form of sarcasm there, it is now considered a part of, and so a life is helping itself, whatever it's up to. It's having large segments of itself take what it has us call dope, and then it has another segment of itself saying shame, 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 and have a large segment itself selling it, and another large segment itself saying no, 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 let me help you get over it. And so now it's accepted in this part of the world, the mechanical avant-garde of society, that this is no laughing matter. This is not something, especially a teenager, they keep saying, but then they say especially grown-up, so it's especially everybody, that this is not something. You have a drug, it's a drug. This is not some game, and so if you're hooked on it, you need help. Paid professional help. You need help. That is, you need somebody else. This is not something a person goes through by themselves, so don't feel bad. Don't sit around there and suffer alone. You don't have to, not as long as you have the cute little hospital in the woods. Call us 24 hours a day. We're here to help. It is now accepted. That is a part of sophisticated, ordinary life. But I'm asking you, now, back to the energy. Forget these words. Forget me making those little jokes about the little for-profit cute hospital and all that. Forget all that. Strip the words. Strip the matter, the temporary matter, off of this energy. And ask yourself, what is life up to that it has people operating in ways that they do what is called things? In other words, get on drugs. And humans can do that quite handily. Does not require paid professional help to get you on drugs. It does not require anybody else. Well, other than somebody to buy it from, I guess. But it doesn't require anybody to help you get on something. That is, to start something. But now, something as serious as life-threatening habits, it is now the more, in the ordinary sense, intellectual, insightful opinion now, acceptance of reality, that this is not a one-person operation to get off this. You need assistance. What is going on? Energy-wise, not matter-wise, not word-wise, not drug-wise, not health-wise. What is it in life's body, the way in which life is expanding its own being, coming out through men, that make things that appear to be of such significance? Of course, individual it is, because it can be life-threatening. But it makes something require help to stop it, and it did not require any help to start it. It's really inspiring to see all those little hands and fingers that were busily making notes suddenly go into freeze mode. All right, I can deal with that. Okay, all right. Okay, all right. Consider then, how about me list out some possibilities for your consideration, if not your ponderation. What could be some of the possibilities that life would be up to? Well, one I mentioned some time back, and I even that night did it, present it to you on the basis of what do you think life is up to. But I was pointing out that in today's world, the ordinary old world of today, the old country, of how rare, verging upon an endangered species it is to find people able to do anything as a solo act. It's just almost impossible. You're down to somebody still trying to be a smithy by themselves in their own barn out in some rural area. It is almost impossible to find someone. There's nothing wrong. Society is not going down the drain. But it's almost impossible to find situations wherein people either do or people show any interest in a one-person operation. Even if they could, as far as it would appear to be, materially speaking, that a guy could open up and say, I am a freelance chiropractor, or I am a shade tree mechanic here in my own backyard. it's almost as though people no longer can actually do that. Let's say he's got the tools. He's got a little garage there. He's got a little house, little outhouse, an outbuilding that he can do work. He paints up his own sign, sticks it there next to the highway. Auto repairs, cheap. He draws an arrow. And by the time he does all that, gets ready for business, what's he going to do? He's going to try to drag his son, his wife, his brother-in-law. He's going to get somebody to say, come over and help. Run the books for me. And his wife said, you ain't got any books yet, you just open. Yeah, we'll be sitting over there and answer the phone in case it rings. So they won't, if I answer, they'll think I don't have any business. All kinds of apparent stories, but it seems to be almost impossible. That is, that life seems to be up to something energy-wise. Not job-related, had nothing to do with employment. All that is the temporary illusion of matter placed upon this flow of energy. But apparently, life has some vested interest in people having a decreased either ability or interest. I'll leave it to you to try and see it the best way you can for the time being, in solo operations. You could be real crude, I guess, and say that most people nowadays need to operate on the buddy system. Everybody needs somebody around to either say you're doing good or to say, you're never going to make it as a brain surgeon. The guy said, well, I was trying to do automotive mechanics. Oh, I'm sorry. How about another possibility? Remember what I'm asking is why life would be arranging things, even what appears to be in life-threatening situations, that it takes now assistance to stop something where it says it takes no assistance to start it. Remember, this has nothing to do with weakness. This is not that people are so weak. I'm sure that they would try and explain that away if you went over to a hospital like that. They wouldn't use terms like that. They wouldn't speak to you in such a pejorative manner when you're paying the big bucks to be helped. But they would simply point out that, I'm sure they'd use fancy Latin terms that they learned in medical school or even law school, about the insidious effects on the human nervous system of the plant cocaine, a derivative of the coca plant, and how it can inhibit the nervous system and the higher intellectual functions to such a point that a person cannot simply go, boy, I wish I'd never started this and I'm going to stop. It's not quite that easy. Physiologically speaking, you need professional help. So it is not looked at as a weakness. It's not looked at anymore as a character flaw. Even forget cocaine. As some of you are old enough that you grew up, well, some of you are nearly old enough, if not, check with your parents. When if you drank too much, and it was known around town, I mean, that was simply a form of character assassination to call you drunk. Nobody made up for you. Nobody said, well, the poor old dear, her husband died. It didn't matter if it was a man or a woman. Somebody'd say, do you realize old Sally Mae's become a wine head? Nobody'd say, yeah, but she's led a hard life. You never heard such as that. If somebody said, do you know so-and-so has been drinking gin on the side between haircuts and there in the shop? The man's reputation, the woman's reputation is shot, and it was not to be rehabilitated. You didn't come around and say, well, wait a minute. It was psychological problems. It was like a character defect. But nowadays, nobody in the sophisticated modern world would dare say that. You just don't even think about it. If you had a relative or a friend or just somebody you heard about, you hear a famous celebrity, a sports figure, has a drinking problem. It's not a drinking problem. The person's not a drunk. It's a psychological problem. It could have some physiological tie-in. They've been in so much pain since all the surgery they've had to do on their elbow for the last 2 years that they started off with a few painkillers and then they had a few drinks. But in other words, it's not a character weakness any longer. The reality of it has literally changed in 30 years. Now back, see, I hadn't forgot my question. I'm trying to give you some more possibilities. Why is it now that it seems that those things of some significance life makes people believe, to think, of some significance such as being addicted to drugs or alcohol? And there are plenty of other examples. I'm just using these because they're easy to talk about. And it now seems that it requires assistance, other people to help you stop this. But doesn't it strike you at all unusual that it does not take a group of people, much less paid professionals, but it can take a group of people to get this energy flow started. But now to change it, to alter it, now by just all modern, sophisticated views, it takes help. And my question to you was what's going on, and I was giving you some possibilities. How about possibility 2? This has something to do with the fact that it takes more than one force to get anything done. All right, how about a third possibility? How about, got to jump back to this good old country view now of my 3 forces necessary for life of C, D, and E, my ad hoc names for them. What if there was this possibility? If we looked at getting on drugs, to stay with that example, as falling in line with D forces, that we just take the ordinary view that being addicted to cocaine or all kinds of drugs is not a good thing, not constructive, it's not good for you health-wise, mental-wise, and etc. So if we looked at that and we were looking then still at the ad hoc, the relative view of the C, D, and E force, that at any given instance, there always seems to be some force, some inclination, some propensity, the possibility that within this situation, even if something that started out that apparently was good, like here's a new religion that's going to help people, and the first thing they do, or a peace conference. Here it is, first thing we're going to do is establish peace. Well, no, the first thing we're going to do, we're going to have to declare a war of everybody that won't sign up. So there's always seems to be, in ordinary life is looked at as a form of irony. But recall, I pointed out to you some time ago, and by God, I know some of you forgot it out of town, that ultimately, in the old world, everything is ironic. You can't escape it. But back to the situation, at any particular relative time, whatever the situation, no matter how innocuous it may seem at first blush, there is within it the kernel of a D force. So what if, this possibility I'm giving you, when people apparently have fallen into temporary employment with the D force, it appears to be much easier than if they then at some time later declare that they would like to align themselves with C force. That is more constructive. All right, try this. Would it not seem, if we were in the building trades and the related periphery activities, would you not think that it doesn't seem easier to operate a bulldozer and knock down trees than to go there and then build the hospital, to build the house? That which from the visible 3D level, that which would apparently be by itself destructive, going out and tearing down those unsightly trees in the way of progress, doesn't that seem to be easier? Is it not? And in fact, easier to go out and knock over trees. Do it faster, takes less energy, less man hours, the less expenditure actually of paying for fossil fuels or whatever they're using to clear out this area than it does to go in there and then C-force build something new. Remember, you people out there that maybe knew this, that is all relative in a way that is staggering, is all ad hoc, but does it not seem to be that it's easier to do something that apparently is aligned with non-constructive, destructive forces, activities, than it does to apparently do something that would be, relatively speaking, more constructive? It's really inspiring to stop when it, and to go back and to really clarify a matter and to see everyone go, boy, I'm glad that got clarified. All right? All right, I'll give you a fourth one. If that's where you're going to be. What if life just wants to remind you of your total dependence? How about that? Take that, all you people who quit going to Mass and won't call your mother on time and tried to change your Social Security number so the IRS couldn't find you. Still What if periodically, you just don't know how to define it, that life, just kind of indiscriminately, doesn't have time to fool with you individually, but kind of indiscriminately in its own ways reminds everybody that you're all off the rack. You're all standing in the queue, you're standing in the slaughter line, and it's my line. And if you move up to the front of the line slower than you expected, you got me to thank. If you move faster than you were hoping for, tough. What can you do? It's trying to give you something to think about, since the first three did not all seem to be home runs within the confines of tonight's ballpark. Perhaps it's because of finally putting lights here in Chicago, but another connection strikes me from the last time we were taping, when I used, I'm not going to replow it all, but if you recall, I started out on that particular paragraph pointing out that the more primitive do not even dream of freedom, and then a corollary, if not a parallel corollary to that, was that those totally captured have no real opposition. That is, once you have given yourself over, once you are captured to the point that, as Kyroots pointed out in one of tonight's commentaries, I think went through everybody's head, that a real sharp captive is not even aware of their captivity. Well, that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? All right. Those totally given over to captivity to such a degree that captivity, figuratively speaking, is just a word. Captivity, to speak to them and say, boy, how does it feel to be captive? What captive? They have no opposition. The jailers are not their foes. See if you can follow it this way. A thing completed has no opposition. Well, it's not that far removed. I'm just going to try to trick you to somewhere else. But if your captivity is a fully fait accompli, if the thing is completed, that is your captivity, they have captured you, and through whatever devilish means and torture, psychological trickery, you're to the point now they can leave the keys there, they can leave your cell open. You wouldn't go anywhere. They couldn't throw you out of there. Your captivity, your jail is your life. Your jailers are your only friends. They have saved you from great horrors that they had originally threatened you with, which shows how sharp everybody is. In that instance, you could look at your captivity as being, by my example, a thing completed, which is what I meant last time by saying if you are totally captured. But now the attempted expansion of this, of me saying it this way, that a thing completed has no opposition. And thing, I really put in quotation marks there for a second, because it would be a thing, a person, a noun, a verb, a system. That which is completed has no opposition. Do it. Not just captivity, not just a person in chains literally, but anything completed has no opposition. If someone stood up in your family, in your tribe, in the halls of your legislature somewhere, and they started talking about, well, and it sounded like they're making this proposal, and suddenly somebody jumps up, some whole system jumps up, a group of people jump and say, wait a minute, No, no, no. No, don't even finish what you're saying. I see where I know where you're headed. No, I'll fight that tooth and nail. And then somebody says, you didn't let him finish. Last night in secret we agreed to do that, and we've already done it. I mean, and they say it, you understand that they're saying it's been done. If I must push this any further, it's like then the guy was going to say, now you mean every bit of it? You mean it can't be undone? All the money spent, it's actually been built, another part torn down, and it's already in operation? Yeah. And maybe the Speaker of the House says, well, you still have the floor. Is there anything you want to say? And the guy goes, well, no, I got to go no, never mind. What can you say, right? If it is literally, as much as it's true in the 3D world, if it is completed, it has no opposition. Now, all right, okay. Now, guess what? I'm not going to say that this has any possible significance internally. You just thought I would. Okay, I will. How about in this fashion? How about in this fashion? That you go ahead, whatever it is that you're going to do, and you go ahead and you do the damn deed with no comment. And if you get that good, just do it with no comment. What that amounts to is you do it before anybody notices it. Of course, by anybody, you know where I'm talking about. I'm talking about the dialogue of life, the energies of life flowing through you that seems to be your own voices, your own opinions, your own objections. If you just do it, and by no comment, you're giving no warning, no indication, you're not going to discuss it. It is outside the general drift of your own dialogue that you decide to do it, but of course all this time I keep telling you that the best way to do something, the most efficient way, is not even tell yourself you're going to do it. Don't discuss it. Now, I used to start off and I tried to make it simple, but you can do it yourself, but now is don't tell anybody. Don't tell anybody, well, I'm going to give up cocaine. Don't tell anybody that. Don't tell somebody you know. Don't call the hospital. Don't call the helpline and say, I want to give up cocaine. They say, well, good for you. Don't do any of that. All right. Don't do it up here. Don't say you are. The dialogue soon enough is going to try to call you up and going to say, you realize you hadn't had any snort here in about 2 hours? Don't answer them. Don't comment. Or if they say, I know what you're trying to do. I've been through this. You're trying to quit. Do the deed with no comment, and if you do it, of course I'm having to comment to say this, which kind of curdles the butterscotch on it. But you do it, you've already decided to do it, except you hadn't told anybody. You just decide, that's it, I'm going to do it. Once you do that, what it amounts to is then there can be no opposition, because by the time anybody notices it, you're in a situation not dissimilar that I was trying to do about the actual person out there who begins to object to something that has come to his attention. Now I want to seriously object to this and tell you that I'm going to fight this, and then it's pointed out that, well, you can do that if you want to, except that it's a deed done. You mean fully done? Oh yeah. Well, I didn't know anything about it. Well, I don't know about that. I'm just telling you it's been done. Now, what do you have to say? Nothing, I'm sorry. All you can do is sit back down. You're going to make an ass of yourself. How can you oppose that? I must admit this is somewhat of a more clinical, if not saying false, deed that you've got to be able to do it, and you don't discuss it with anybody. You don't try and get anybody's opinion. You don't listen to any of your objections. You don't listen to any of your own timetables. Whatever the direction seemed to be that you were going, you shifted. Just enough that you knew you did. But you don't have to holler at 10 degrees port. Internally, you can do it with your eyes. If you know how, you just go. So in other words, you can apparently, on film, it surely shows up if you people are watching on tape. You see actors, you see anchormen trying to play out their ad-libbing the news for 30 minutes. But if you notice the eyes, it's no big secret. But you don't have to holler 20 degrees starboard. Internally, you can do this. Just a bit. But if you shifted a little bit and you didn't ask anybody and you knew what you were doing, it's a deed done. And the rest of them can complain if they want to, which they will. They can want to question you on the matter. But if it becomes obvious that the thing is completed, it is in fact outside the ordinary stream of things, this is a deed done. There is no opposition. Surely you hear that. If I had to make it apparently any more ordinary world simpatico, I just had to say it would be ridiculous. Who would be so foolish? Who would make such an ass of themselves to actually oppose, in deed or word, that which is irreversible? That which is just simply, totally completed. Back to the world of energy and not just what appears to be the talking world of matter. It's not because it would appear to be foolish, it is simply because of the way that life works. You can look at it as being the most efficient use of energy. Once life has done something over here and actually done it for whatever length of time life does something, but if it does it, even life does not waste this internal time by having some other part of itself go, well, I see that you've actually irreversibly done that, but could I say this? You know, it doesn't do it that way. Only humans do that. And even they don't do it. They just apparently they do it. How much time we got? 15 minutes to the end of time. I'm going to stop so there'll be 15 minutes of blank space on the end of this tape, and since I'm encouraging people's enrichment of their lives and making new actions for the 15 or 14 now, then this blank 14 minutes at the end of this tape, then we have more of a participatory involvement here. You people fill in on your own individually the following 13 and a half minutes of this tape. Bon voyage.